Hello everybody and welcome back to another edition of KerVAM. Sorry it's been forever since the last one. Summer came in and just meant that, it just doesn't quite happen. But of course we are a Doctor Who podcast where we talk all about Doctor Who, DVDs, Blu-rays, the special features, documentaries of Doctor Who, and of course today the animations of Doctor Who. We're going to be discussing the animated version of the Abominable Snowmen that was released earlier this week. Discussing the animation itself, what we like and dislike about it. We're going to cover off the special features included in the DVD, Blu-ray, Steelbook release, whichever one you got. And we're also going to talk about whether there is any hope for a future animated Doctor Who or not, because it looks like this could be the end. So it's going to be a fun little chat. I'm joined today by Bill and Ryan. Ryan, have you been enjoying another chance to look at some animated Doctor Who? Because it feels like it's been a while since the last one.
Yeah, it's definitely been a long while. I think it's been about just over a year since the last one. I think the last one was Evil of the Daleks.
Oh, it's Galaxy 4. Galaxy 4. That was like November last year, I think, something like that. So it's been a long time, but
yeah, it feels like it's been ages, and probably going to be even more ages now after this, or indefinitely, given the state of news there's been about Doctor Who animations. But
indeed,
hopefully we can hope for the best, but we shall soon see.
Yeah, indeed. And Bill, we do at least have one more to chat about and discuss today, don't we? Which is exciting and is a good thing.
Yeah, it's definitely a good thing to be having another animation. It has been almost a year now since the last one, so I'm surprised really that it didn't really include a documentary about the animation itself, because it might have been interesting to see why it took them a bit longer. Maybe some of the BBC America stuff had a part to play in that, perhaps. It is a shame that this is going to be at least the last one for probably at least a couple of years, but I'm sure that they will continue in some form some time down the line at some point.
Yeah, exactly, and we'll certainly come on to more discussion about that possible future for the animation range. So the Abominable Snowmen, I can't say it's a story that I had massively strong feelings about either way. I definitely had watched the recon once, like, I don't know, 4 years ago or something. Obviously there was only one existing episode 2, so I feel like it's been a story that it's not been quite in the same sort of consciousness and awareness than certainly Web of Fear has become since it got rediscovered around 10 years ago. So Ryan, what sort of impressions of the story did you have going into the animation? Did you have much of an idea of the story?
More of a roughness. It's been nearly a decade since I last listened to this story, so it's been a good while, and I will say some of it I only remembered vague bits of it because obviously it's been nearly a decade ago, but watching it again, it did help bring it back what I did remember about it and rediscovering it again. And when they did first announce it, I was interested in it. I mean, then again, with the Web of Fear Part 3 getting animated, it was only a matter of time before the Abominable Snowman was going to get the same treatment. And I was excited about it because it's great intelligence in the Yeti, which I think is always a plus, and seeing how they were able to sort of, capture that setting of Tibet in animation and how they were going to translate everything. And I have to say, and of course it was done by the same team who did the Fury from the Deep animation, so which I thought was solid enough, even though I did have some issues with it, the arms mostly. I would say this is definitely their best effort to date. I do think this definitely they've learned their lesson from Fury from the Deep. I think they refined it a bit more, and having watched it twice, I didn't think the arms looked as long as they did originally in Fury from the Deep.
Yes.
So that definitely a plus. I definitely think they got it. I think they got it just about right. Again, not my favorite animation. That will probably still go to Evil of the Daleks, but this is still a good, solid attempt. And in terms of in comparing the two, Yeti Great Intelligence Animations. This is leagues above Web of Fear. Absolutely.
Yeah. Web of Fear. Well, we don't talk about Web of Fear. We did one podcast on it, and that was well enough to talk about the Web of Fear. Yeah, we're not going to go any there. Bill, for you, was it a new story? Was it something you had much awareness of going into it?
I think I once had the Target novelization of it. I think about 10. So I'd read that, but and obviously watched the reconstruction and everything. But I still, yeah, it's still been a while for me. So to be able to kind of like Ryan jog my memory by watching it again, that was really nice. And yeah, I think, like you were saying, it's kind of one of them stories which I think does get forgotten about. I think, especially compared to the Web of Fear, because, like you say, it was most of the episodes were rediscovered 10 years ago, and then just, I suppose, if you were to take them even as just stories themselves, I suppose the Web of Fear kind of has got more going for it because it's in the London Underground, it's first appearance of the Brigadier and stuff like that. Whereas the Abominable Snowmen, it's still a really cool setting with the being in the Himalayas and everything, but I suppose maybe for some people it doesn't quite capture the imagination perhaps as much as Web of Fear does. But having said that, I think it is actually a pretty good story, and deserves a lot more attention. And I'm glad, obviously, of this animation being released a few days ago, that it will now get that attention that it needs. As for the animation itself, like Ryan, I wouldn't really say that it's my favorite, but again, I wouldn't say it's my least favorite either. I mean, I would definitely take it over the Web of Fear and Galaxy 4.
Yeah.
Because it's definitely a much better animation than them two. But not say Galaxy 4 was bad, but the story itself didn't really, wasn't very interesting. But the animation for the Abominable Snowmen worked quite well, yeah. I think it is one of Big Finish's better attempts at it, yeah. The only thing I would really say is I think most of the sets worked fine with the animated characters and everything, even though they kind of went what they did with, I think, Fury from the Deep, which is more kind of realistic approach to the sets. But I think the one set that didn't quite look right compared when you had the animated characters in it was the courtyard in the monastery. I think looked a bit too realistic for the animated characters to be in, but it's still a really good looking set. So, it's just a little nitpick really, but
yeah,
I would say it's a really good animation. And it's a good one to kind of end this particular phase of the animation on. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think that, certainly for me, I didn't have much of an impression of this story going into it. I couldn't recall the plot. So it was kind of nice to go into something quite fresh. I mean, I watched this at the BFI as well, which is quite exciting. I'll cover that off in a minute, some of the info that came out of the BFI. But yeah, seeing it on the big screen was really, really cool. And yeah, just some of the sort of vistas and things are so impressive. The sort of the sort of mountains that we see in there, that sort of high shot looking down on the monastery as well. That I thought that was really, really impressive, and just a lot of the sort of what would have been location scenes, I suppose, do feel really well realized. The sort of vibrant colors of the snow, and then the yetis, and all of that. I think it just that side of the animation works really, really effectively. Obviously, the story itself, I think, is just kind of quite slow is probably the best way I can describe it. It sort of feels those first kind of 2 or 3 episodes, it's not that it's bad in any way. It does just feel like it's quite a sort of slow, gradual plot, more than some classic. I know classic Who is generally pretty slow, but it just felt parts of this were particularly slow, and it probably didn't help that Padma Sambhavar was talking exceptionally slow the whole way through the story as well. He liked to really elongate his words, and it's just it makes a scene last a very long time to get the information across there. But it was okay, and I thought that sort of side of it that looked really cool. The Padma Sambhavar, his sort of what you could kind of was kind of hidden behind that sort of curtain. You could kind of see the outline, a sort of ghostly figure, and then had him sort of revealed as this, really creepy looking, meant to be like 300-year-old person or something. Essentially, he was obviously possessed by the Great Intelligence. That, I thought that was really well realized, and the same with the Yetis as well themselves. As much as they kind of like they had massive beards on their faces is the only way I could describe it. I felt that sort of darker bit just looked like massive beards. But it was fine. I thought it worked. It still worked. And, we got the usual good modelling of the main characters and things like that as well, which I all thought worked really effectively. Though I did think it was kind of funny that in the scenes with lots of like extras, essentially, that you could see that those extras were just the same character models duplicated with different facial hair and like a different hat or something. And I just thought that was quite funny that they hadn't gone to the extra lengths to create different character models. They just duplicated them and then tweaked little features on them to try and make them appear different for those, scenes where they needed it. But it was great that they actually did that, because obviously with a story like Galaxy 4, the last one we had, there was like 4 characters in that story. Like you virtually never saw more than 2 or 3 characters on screen at the same time because it was such a small cast. Whereas actually there's quite a few people in this monastery, so obviously there's going to be quite a few characters. And I think it was good that the animation was still able to kind of cater for that, I suppose. So I thought that was really, really impressive. But yeah, for Ryan, for you, what was sort of what were the particular highlights of the animation, did you think? What do you think really worked about it?
Well, one thing I will say is that, well, first, I will agree that it is a bit of a slow story, but funny enough, this morning I was watching Galaxy 4 with my niece, Imogen, because she wanted to watch it, and even though that is a shorter story with only 4 parts, that felt slower than this one for some reason. I don't know what it is, but there was something about Galaxy 4 that made it feel, even though it's shorter, it felt more slower than this one. And this is a 6-parter, so it's a little. I definitely noticed that, which was a bit weird. In terms of the highlights of the animation, I was actually surprised by the complete redesign of Padma Sambhavar, because obviously, even though I heard the audio, I did see the pictures of what he actually looked like in the story, about what his original design, and so to see the fact that he was completely redesigned, that completely took me by surprise, because I thought they were going to stick at least close enough to what he originally, these kinds of type, but the fact that he was the most changed, again, that was probably the biggest. I think that was probably the biggest highlight, was the fact that they went in such a massive radical direction, instead of being this sort of almost elegantly robed yet slightly more obviously makeup on his face looking guy.
Yeah.
They went with sort of this ragged cloak and looking like a decaying corpse, really, which was, again, pretty striking. But honestly, I thought the redesign actually kind of worked within the context of the story, and given the fact that this is a body that's meant to be over 300 years old, and it makes perfect sense. And so I was definitely impressed with the fact that they went with such a radical direction in certain areas in it.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the thing with these animations. Maybe I've had a change of heart since many years ago. I don't know, but I feel like they should take creative decisions to do things a little bit differently, because it's the medium of animation, and like, why wouldn't you take that opportunity to like improve things in places, fix things in places? Like, the animation is never going to replace the original story, and that, I don't think it should necessarily try to do that 100%. Obviously, it is very much a visual representation of something that we can't watch anymore, and that's great, but I don't feel like it has to try and be exactly like the original, and we should, criticize that. I think, as you say, Ryan, I think it can improve the story in many areas if you improve on some of these costumes and designs of things that just weren't so good in the original. So yeah, I think that it's important to have that creative freedom in many ways. But yeah, for you, Bill, what were some of the highlights of the animation?
I think it was just the whole thing just felt a lot better than like I say, some of the previous ones, and it worked well within the story. Like it wasn't like I suppose you could say it wasn't really like the animation, whereas the Web of Fear one was so different from anything we'd gotten before that it was kind of almost distracting really to the actual episode. Whereas with the Abominable Snowman, because it's a more familiar kind of animation design that we're used to, I felt like it worked a lot better with the story and just gelled a lot better with it. And yeah, as for reimagining things, again, I'm like you, I'm completely for it in many ways if it will improve the story, and I think it did improve the story a lot. Yeah, I think Gary Russell said that they deliberately wanted to make the monks look like actual Tibetans from that era, as opposed to just white guys in their makeup and everything, which they did in the original. And I think as much as it might be kind of, I suppose, jarring to go from that and then to the surviving episode 2. I think it works a lot better, really, because it shows us that when we are in, Tibet, in the Himalayas, we are in a different place, a different country. I mean, I've not watched the coloured animation, but I'm sure they've probably been able to actually include snow for the Himalayas as opposed to the original, of course, because there was no snow where they were filming in, I think, Wales, wasn't it, at the time?
I have an interesting fact about that, thanks to Gary Russell at the BFI screening. He said that actually on the Himalayas there's hardly any snow. And he had a mate who went there just before they did the animation or something. And he said, there's hardly any snow here. And so actually there is it's only on the very tops of the mountains that there's snow. And so on the rest of it, it's very much just sort of like brown, muddy, slushy type sort of ground to it, rather than it being completely covered in snow, because that's not the reality of most of the Himalayas. It's only the very, very tops. So I thought, obviously the real explanation was they were in Wales and there wasn't any snow. But even in the Himalayas, that actually wasn't the case. So they decided against doing that. And as he was also explaining, it gets a whole lot more complicated with animating if you have snow, because you've got a footprint that goes down into the snow and then comes out, and you've got to, keep that going on every single scene and every shot, and it'd just be a nightmare. So they thought, let's not bother with the snow so much. Yeah, I mean, what else? Obviously, I went to the BFI, so I might as well try and pull out anything interesting that I learned from, because they had Gary Russell, they had Rob Ritchie, and Johan Morris. Rob Ritchie, who's the main guy who's done Daleks on lots of the previous ones. I think he did some of the TARDIS models, and then Johan helped on some of the initial concepts for it. And it sounded, from what Gary was saying, it basically sounded like the process started like 2.5 years ago. Pretty much before COVID even happened, they started discussing and working on this. And that actually Abominable Snowmen was commissioned before Galaxy 4. Like the BBC, I don't know, in 2019 maybe, I think 2018-19 said, we want you to do Abominable Snowmen. And then a bit further down the line went, also, by the way, can you do Galaxy 4 as well? So I thought that was quite interesting, that they didn't necessarily commission it in the order it was released. I can't remember quite if there was a reason why they went and did Galaxy 4 first, but that certainly Abominable Snowmen was given the commission much earlier. And I think in many ways they sort of knew that it was going to be the last one, so they wanted to kind of end on that slightly higher note, because I feel like any on Galaxy 4 would have not been the greatest thing for the animation range. It really has to be said. I'm glad they at least went back to a slightly better and more love story for this part. But yes, that was interesting to hear that they worked on it for ages. I think Gary said they were sort of actively working on it for around 15 to 18 months. I'm pretty sure Evil of the Daleks was 18 months, and then this I think was 15 months. But it was pretty much all done by March, April this year. So I don't know quite why it took them another 6 months to release it, but much earlier in the year it was actually completed. Bill, as you said, with the different characters, they obviously decided to, have them represented correctly within the monastery of, real Asian characters that would actually be in the monastery, whether it's from Korea or China or Japan, different Asian countries, and having those sort of people in there, which just kind of gave that story more realism, I think, than what the reality of it actually what we would have seen. So yeah, there were lots of interesting little tidbits like that he gave. I'm trying to think. I can't remember if there's anything else he said, but it was a very, very interesting little discussion afterwards. Obviously, it was great to see the actual thing. We saw it sort of in two parts, episodes 1 to 3 and then 4 to 6. We saw the first 7 minutes of the documentary as well, which was quite cool to see a little bit of that up on the big screen as well. It all just looks cooler when it's on a big cinema screen as well, doesn't it? So that was really fun. And yeah, it was just a good experience. I mean, obviously, there's probably not going to be any more animated ones, but they are doing one for they're doing the Time Meddler for the season 2 Blu-ray the end of October, which I think will also be quite good. So I think I might try and go to some more of these because they're actually quite fun. Whether it's a new story to you in a way, I guess, or not, I think it's still quite a fun experience. And obviously, the other thing that Gary had something to say about was the future of animated Doctor Who, and the fact that that's looking fairly unlikely at the moment. It has to be said. He was basically flat out asked by the sort of moderator, a guy from the BFI, is this going to be the final one? And he basically, or are you working on anything else at the moment? And he was like, no, we're simply not. That's it. Big Finish Creative, who are the guys who have made this, and Galaxy 4 and Fear from the Deep, and maybe another one, or was it Faceless Ones as well? I can't actually remember. But
Faceless Ones was done by the same people who did the Macro Terror.
Oh, yeah, you're right, which is the other one. Yeah. So then so then this lot have done Fury, Galaxy 4, and this, and they're finished doing animations. They're not going to do any more. That's game over. And he said he's not aware. He knows there's not any active projects of any other animations as well at the moment. So he sort of talked about how it's going in cycles. We had the Invasion, then we had that set of 4 in 2013 with Reign of Terror, Ice Warriors, 10th Planet, and Moonbase in the space of a sort of a year or so. And then Power of the Daleks kind of kicked off this next run of releases we've had. And we've had, obviously, Sharda, Macro Terror, Faceless Ones, Fear from the Deep, Evil of the Daleks, Galaxy 4, and this. And Web of Fear, I suppose, as well, that extra episode of Web of Fear. So we've had loads, and that's been brilliant. But this is very much that end point for the time being. Which is a real shame for many reasons. Obviously, the animations have been great, and it's a real shame that they are coming to an end. It's not to say they'll never do any more, but it's just that, as of today, no one at the BBC is planning to make any more animations. That's kind of where we're at, rather than it will never happen. It's just that right now it's not going to. That's a shame because they've been great, and there's still so many to animate. We've obviously got the 60th anniversary next year as well, which would have been an ideal time to release some animations. So it's a real shame that seems very unlikely, particularly given the lead time of animations. I struggle to see an animation coming out next year if they haven't even thought, even if they started tomorrow, it would be a stretch to get it out before the end of next year. So I don't know. Bill, for you, does it feel, a bit of a sad moment to sort of be saying goodbye to animations for the time being?
It does, yeah. I mean, it's like you say, it's been really a lot of stuff has been released over the past few years, especially since 2020, I think. There's been at least 2 or 3 every single year for the past 2 years. And, I think we've gotten so used to that being the case that now that it's suddenly abruptly come to an end, it's going to take a while to get used to, definitely. But, I try to be optimistic about it and think I don't really believe that this is the final end for animations as a whole. I think there will come a time, maybe in 3 to 5 years, where we might get another couple or something. But even if these were the last ones we ever got, I think we've gotten just so many. We've filled in so many gaps already. I mean, the fact that we've almost completely finished the Patrick Troughton era.
Yeah.
I mean, that is something that I never thought would happen 5-10 years ago. So the fact that we've only got, I think, 3 stories actually left to animate now of his entire era, that is a massive achievement. And, all the people involved in these animations, I really do think that, they should themselves for the work they've done has been so consistently good. I mean, even Web of Fear, Galaxy 4, the ones that we didn't enjoy quite as much, at least we've got them. It's better to have them than nothing, I suppose.
Mm.
So yeah, it is a bittersweet and very tragic that it's come to an end so soon, but hopefully, I mean, I don't think anyway that this will be the last animation ever, but it may take quite a while because, I mean, who knows who else is going to be able to fund them.
Yeah.
And who knows what other issues there could be. I mean, we say it's the funding, but you never know, there could be all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a sad time, and it's interesting to think about. Yeah, what if it were to come back, how it would come back. Obviously, as you say, Billy, we should be, we're very lucky to have what we have. There's, we should. I think it's important to not feel that sort of entitlement that we should get more. They should keep making them for us, because actually we're just really lucky to have what we have so far. I mean, I was just looking through the episode list, and it's like, we've gone from a point of most of Troughton being destroyed and gone to having the majority of season 4, 5, and 6 now. All of his seasons. You're only missing the Wheel in Space in season 5 now. That's the only one with anything missing. And even season 4, there's only a couple of stories in there. What Highlanders and a couple of episodes of Underwater Menace that haven't been animated. And then the Space Pirates in season 6, and that's it for the whole of the Troughton era. When before, 10 years ago, we were missing, a vast number of stories, huge parts of it. So, yeah, I think we can be very pleased with that. I think certainly if you're a Hartnell fan, I suppose, you could feel a little bit hard done by that the focus has been so heavily on Troughton, and I can definitely understand that. And I think I don't know if it's a surprise that they've gone this route, but I guess it's always been, once they started doing Troughton, it was therefore always cheaper to use the same character models. And so do more Troughton stories that have got the same characters in, and that's more straightforward. And a lot of Troughton stories are probably easier sells because of the monsters in them and all that kind of thing as well. So I kind of understand that. But I don't know, Ryan, do you think if you're a really big Hartnell Doctor Who fan, then you might feel a bit hard done by that of all these animations, only one of them has been a Hartnell one?
Yeah, I would definitely understand. I mean, I absolutely love all of the 60s. I'm both a Hartnell and a Troughton fan. I mean, I've always maintained that Hartnell, Troughton, Pertwee, Baker, and Capaldi are my favourite Doctors ever. And yeah, just it's a shame we're not getting any more Hartnells, because I would have loved an animation of Dalek's master plan. I knew that's always going to be a big task. It was always going to be a big challenge.
Yeah.
But I would have loved to have seen that and the original Mission to the Unknown animated. And the fact we only got a little tease of that at the end of Galaxy 4.
It's the worst, isn't it?
That's never going to happen. It's a real shame, because I would have loved to have seen that animated. I would have also liked to have seen other Hartnell's animated, whether it's Marco Polo, The Crusade, the Massacres, the Savages. I think there's some Hartnell stories that would have definitely benefited from animation, the animation treatment, and yes, it is a shame that Troughton got more of a priority, but then again, a lot of them were really great ones. I mean, we've got Evil of the Daleks, Macra Terror, Faceless Ones. I mean, really good, solid animations, and it is a real shame that the funding was cut off by BBC America and they weren't being able to do anymore, because I think they were pretty much on a roll after. I guess Power of the Daleks starts off a bit iffy, but then again, that was they were basically half done with that story by the time it came out, and it took them another few years until they managed to properly release it.
Fixed it. I forget that one happened. The second release of Power of the Daleks.
Yeah, and that ended up being better than it was originally, of course. But I think by the time they did the second one, which was Sharda, I think they were pretty much on a roll after that, because I think they really got into the swing of with the animations. Yes, there were some hiccups on the way, web of fear. But for the most part, they were doing really well with these animations, and in particular, this stage of animations. I think because what we've got been some of the best of the lot. And it's a real shame that it's been cut off short, especially when it's the 60th anniversary is just right around the corner. And I would have loved them to manage to squeeze out another 2, maybe even 3 next year, and then that would have been it. But it's sad. It's really sad. And I would have loved at least a good chunk of them to end up the collection Blu-rays, and then with the animation's now being cut practically dead at this point in time, it's going to be. I'm curious to know what they're going to do about season 3 when they get to do the Blu-ray collection. I was just
looking into this and thinking about it, and I think we've kind of been saved for some seasons, like seasons 4 and 5 have kind of been saved by the animation range, particularly season 4. Like most of that is animation now, which is great that we've got that. But and so I think really season 3 is the only truly problematic season now that needs to be released, because the rest of them have all only got maybe 1 or 2 at the most stories that don't have animation or episodes. But season 3 is just a disaster from an episode point of view. Like, you've got to feel that's probably going to be pretty much the last release they do as well. Like, they're going to put it off as long as possible and hope something gets animated between now and then, because it just, there's what, Missions of the Unknown, 4 episodes of The Mythmaker's missing, 9 episodes of Dalek Master Plan, 4 of The Massacre, 3 of Celestial Toymaker, and 4 of The Savages. That's like, what, 30 episodes missing? That you're just going to try and sell Telesnap recons of? It's... I don't envy the team having to do that.
Yeah, the fact that it seems like what we now know from the season 2 announcement, that it seems like the only route forward is recons with audio. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a tough sell if it's going to be recons, because I gave the Abominable Snowman a bit of a test with the recons, and I can understand why some say it's a rough going when trying out the recons.
Yes, recons are... I'll do them because I want to experience the story, but, it's not necessarily... I don't want to say it's not an enjoyable experience, but it's not really enjoyable watching reconstructions. You're just kind of trying to do it because you're a fan and you feel like, I've got to get through this story in my marathon, so I've got to watch the recon. And I mean, at least the recons nowadays aren't as bad as the infamous Underwater Menace recon. But, outside of that, they're a little bit better. But yeah, I think it's more manageable when, like season 2's only got 2 recons on it for the 2 episodes of The Crusade. At worst case, I guess season 1 will have the whole of Marco Polo. And season 6 will have 4 episodes of the Space Pirate, 5 episodes of the Space Pirates. So it's not as much as having 30 episodes across 6 different stories like we're going to have in season 3. So yeah, well, that's a problem for 5 years' time, I sense, because
unless they find some way of making the recons more visually appealing than they were before. If they find some way, then maybe it will be passable, but if not, I think we're going to be in a rough going, especially when it comes to season 3.
Yes, yeah. That's always going to be the one with a little bit of concern, I think, it has to be said. Yeah. Well, of course, we've talked about the animation itself and the future of animations, but we haven't yet covered off the special features included in the Abominable Snowmen release, because, of course, with anything classic Doctor Who, at least, there are some special features there, which are usually worth watching. And we had a couple of little extra bits. We had an interview from the 90s with the writer Mervyn Haseman, I think it is. It's Haseman. And JNT, done by JNT from, I think, an American or Canadian thing in the 90s, which, a reasonable short little interview, an archive interview. And there's some location footage as well, because, of course, famously, Fraser Hines took a 8mm film camera onto the location shoot. And so there's some great, really high, stunning, because it's film, it's really high quality as well. Some really impressive footage from the story, or from behind the scenes of the story, I guess, which is really cool to see. But of course, the main feature was the latest Chris Chapman documentary, the making of for the Abominable Snowmen, Trousen in Tibet, and they went on site to Wales, to Snowdonia, to go and film it. Take Fraser Hines and a TARDIS to Snowdonia. Bill, what did you think of this documentary? I thought it was quite fun, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed the sort of like relationship that Fraser Hines and Toby Haddock had with each other. And yeah, it wasn't really a kind of massively, well, it was in depth, but it wasn't massively in depth, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
As compared to some other like making of documentaries. But I think it was a nice kind of different, fun way of doing the making of documentary, not just sitting people down, and just having them talk about what happened and everything. It was nice to have Fraser and Toby on location with the TARDIS. And then I think the makeup designer, Sylvia James, is it? Joins them later on as well.
Yeah.
And it was just nice to hear like all their different recollections of the production and what it was like, especially to film on location, and how I think it was one of the, like they were really glad when they were able to go on location, because they'd been stuck in the studio in London for so long that they were so happy to get out to somewhere as far away from London as Wales. So yeah, I think it was just really lovely. It was nice to see, I can't remember his name, but the last Ice Warrior, not Ice Warrior, the last Yeti person,
John Hogan.
Yeah, that's it. Who I think he recently passed away, didn't he?
Yeah, it was quite poignant. I'm at the BFI on Sunday. Chris Chapman revealed that, or Saturday, he revealed that he'd learned that morning that John had passed away. I think he passed away in reality in sort of January or February of this year, but nobody had known about it until this point. Chris Chapman had gone to what was John's old house to try and, see what was going on, and learned that he'd passed away. So that's why there isn't a sort of dedication or anything in that, because they simply didn't know when they were making it. But obviously it's great to be able to have him included in there when they shot it last year. So that was really cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just overall, I just think it was a really good making of documentary. Like I say, it was a bit different from some of the more traditional making ofs, but I think that works in its favor. And yeah, it was just, like you say, it was just a lot of fun, and I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think, as you say, it kind of, I think a good comparison in many ways is like what we recently discussed was the with the Two Doctors, where they did a new making of for the Two Doctors on the season 22 box set, and of course that they weren't able to go on location to go and shoot that, and so it did feel much more the sort of classic style, shall we say, Talking Heads making of documentary, as opposed to a lot of the stuff Chris Chapman does, where he kind of, I guess, tries to think out of the box with it a little bit sometimes, and just, tries to find more visually interesting and unique ways of covering different stories. And obviously it depends on the story, because, we remember Galaxy 4, for example, there's no location to shoot that with or anything like that. And so he just took a Chumbly to Peter Purvis's house and filmed that instead. Like, he just kind of looks for ways to just make it visually interesting. Obviously, Abominable Snowmen massively played into its favour by having it filmed in Snowdonia, and it's even if, I guess, some of the insight is more just, wow, it's so great to be back here, and don't you remember how much fun we had, or how cold it was, or whatever, as opposed to really in-depth gritty detail of it, which there was an element of in the documentary, but maybe not the same degree. I think it's just makes it all that bit more fun, I suppose, a fun and enjoyable watch, and just being able to see also what these locations look like now after 55 years since this story was released. So yeah, I thought that was great. I thought it was a real great part of it. Ryan, what was your take on the documentary?
I thought it was a really good, solid documentary. It was also Moon Balloon. I think they were the company that did the documentary, and of course they did a lot of the documentaries for the collection range.
Yeah, Moon Balloon is basically the name that Chris Chapman calls all his films. Basically, it's the sort of, I'm not sure it's an official production company, but it is the production company that he runs essentially.
Yeah, and I have to say he does definitely knows how to make insightful documentaries and make them feel as very important, as opposed to the original behind the scenes stuff, and it was just basically talking head interviews. It seems like he definitely wants to make these ones stand out much more than they had been in the past, and this is definitely no exception. It was great to see them back on Snowdonia in South Wales and trying to match up locations to see where they matched in the original footage. It was seeing Fraser Hines there as well is always a joy. And it's, yeah, I definitely thought this was a great documentary and definitely added some more insight into it, and seeing how Deborah Watling got her dad the part of Professor Travers, and seeing old like archive interviews with them, and of course again hearing the famous story about that one time when they were filming that scene where she was in that trance by the Great Intelligence, and they tried to find a way to snap her out of it, and then of course they ended up playing a magical joke and just took like I think it was like a box of all the props and anything they could grab and just dropped it behind her to cause her, which I thought was hilarious. So it was definitely a fun documentary, and definitely a good addition to this for this story, and no doubt for the collection range, it inevitably appears on the season 5 box set.
Yeah, exactly, and that again was another thing that Chris Chapman was talking about at the BFI, was just the opportunity that with these releases to be able to make making of documentaries that just simply might not have happened if they didn't have an animation and didn't have a budget to do that or anything like that, because as great as the collection releases are, they don't have endless money. And, you know, if there's 7 stories with no making of documentary, you're not going to get a making of for all 7 of them on a collection box set. You might get 1 or 2. And so by ticking these off the list, and particularly, you know, last year to a story like Galaxy 4, that 100% would not have got a making of if it was just a missing story on the collection range. Like, it would just be bare bones, a couple of recons. But actually, we've got a 40-minute making of for it, you know, with a Chumble at Peter Purvis's house. So it's just, you know, these things where I think we can be really grateful that we've got not just the animations themselves, but also this extra content that, again, just likely wouldn't have been made if you know, these animations hadn't come to pass. So I think, yeah, we can be quite lucky with that. And I think that this, again, is one of those great documentaries, you know, that we've kind of, I don't want to say become used to, but we just kind of, I think, almost feel like we expect a higher standard than we may be used to now, when we've just seen that, like, the production values can be kind of just increased in that way by just going out on location, taking a drone, taking the TARDIS and plumping it down somewhere, like they did with the location feature on the season 22 box set. You know, it's just the simple things, but it can make such a big difference to just the enjoyment of these different features. And I think that we definitely have seen that again here. And I think we're going to see a bit of that on the season 2 box set as well. We've got the, I think, Looking for David feature, haven't we, about David Whittaker, and a few different new features there as well, which we're going to be talking more about down the line. But yeah, so overall, guys, where would you say this animation ranks in the set of animations? I know it's always a hard ranking, and I feel like, well, we probably did a ranking where we did our animation special like a year ago or something, but then we've had a few released since then, so maybe we should do another one now that they've kind of stopped. But I'm going to come to you first, Bill. If you could put it today, either if you're going to put it at number 1, then put it number 1, or if it's below that, then you've got to name which stories you'd put above Abominable Snowmen. That's the task. I know it's a hard one.
That's very hard. Yeah, it's very hard because there's just so many good ones, isn't there? Yeah. Especially the past few years. I wouldn't say it's number 1. No. I think that would probably go to something more like Eve of the Daleks or Makwatewa or something like that. At least the ones of the past few years anyway. Yeah. And then I suppose, I think it would definitely, if not in the top 5, then just out of it, I think, at least. Mm-hmm. So 5th or 6th place. So probably, I suppose, between I know some people didn't like Fury from Deep, but I actually quite enjoyed it. But then again, I just like the story anyway, so that's probably why. So I'd probably put it maybe a little bit above Fury from the Deep, actually. Okay. And then have probably Evil of the Daleks. No, not Evil Daleks. I've already said that for number 1. No, Power of the Daleks, I think I'd put as the remastered version. Yeah. Probably Abominable or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair. That's a good ranking. I can go with that. I'll give you mine in a minute. But Ryan, where's your ranking at?
A little bit similar to Bill's, actually. I think Evil of the Daleks is definitely my number one. Then it would be the Macra Terror. Then Sharda. Then Faceless Ones, Power of the Daleks remastered.
Yeah.
Then it would be this. Then Fury from the Deep. I think they're both in the middle.
Yeah.
But then again, do we count the previous answer, the Invasion, and so? Because I would put Invasion around that area as well.
Yeah, I would.
Because I do think the Invasion animation, even though it was the first one, that was still a great animation.
Well, they probably had the biggest budget of any of the animations to do it, to be honest. So that's probably one of the reasons why it looks so good and just fits so well in that story. I think it's definitely high up there.
Yeah, absolutely. The 2013-14 animations, like from Reign of Terror to
Moonbase.
The Moonbase. Then it'll be those, and then Web of Fear down at the absolute bottom. Definitely.
Yeah.
Again, I can understand the reason behind it. It was an interesting experiment, but man, it was an experiment that they should never have tried. Again, it's like, to quote Jeff Goldblum from Jurassic Park, it's like as if they were spending so much time thinking whether or not they could, they just didn't bother to stop to think if they should.
Well, exactly.
And that was Web of Fear in a nutshell.
Yeah, we don't talk about Web of Fear. That is at the bottom of the ranking. Will always be at the bottom of the ranking. I probably will still watch it when I watch Web of Fear because I prefer it to a Telesnap Recon, but it'll be 25 minutes every time that I'm hoping goes past more quickly than 25 minutes. My ranking, I would I agree with you guys. Evil of the Daleks is at the top. It's the ultimate animation. I don't think there's any other way of looking at it. It's definitely the best one they've done so far at any point. Macra Terror is also top quality, probably not as much in terms of story, but in terms of pure animation, it's also absolutely brilliant. Then after that, I think I would put Abominable pretty close. I sort of realised that Power of the Daleks is in many ways a bit of an anomaly, because Power of the Daleks, the remastered version, was black and white only, which it now feels unusual because all of the other animations they've done since 2016 have been in colour, or primarily to be made in colour, apart from Power of the Daleks. So there's an interesting fact. I don't know quite what it means, but it's interesting. So I would put it. I would put it behind the Faceless Ones because I prefer the story of the Faceless Ones. But I would kind of put the animation on the sort of level below Evil of the Daleks and Macra Terror, but on the sort of Faceless Ones and Fury from the Deep level. I'd put Abominable Snowmen there. And then Power of the Daleks, I kind of put out to one side with all the black and white ones like Invasion and the other 2 episode ones they did, because they just feel slightly different because they're black and white. They almost feel like they're meant to be more not accurate, but more fitting in with the original bits of stories. Whereas all these other colour ones feel like their kind of own thing a bit more. So I feel like that's why I kind of separate them a little bit. But I was looking through it, and it's remarkable that there are 14 stories now that have animated episodes for them. So that's pretty cool. As much as it's a shame that they're finishing, I think it's pretty cool and impressive that they've covered so many up until this point. And you never know, they might even discover some more episodes if we're really lucky. But no, that's probably not going to happen. It's been 10 years, the longest gap ever between missing episodes being discovered. So it's looking less and less likely on that front as well. But, we've still got the collection range. So that's going to keep this podcast going because we haven't got a lot else anymore. And I know we haven't talked about season 2 yet, but we will. We will down the line. And one other thing I should say, of course, actually, is that Charlie unfortunately couldn't join us this evening. He's been off busy doing other things. But he did want to have his say on the Abominable Snowmen and the special features. So I'm going to drop in right now a little bit of a thought from Charlie.
Hello everybody, I'm very sorry I couldn't make it to the recording of this episode of KerVAM today, but me and Elliot have agreed that I can do my own little segment of the video just talking a little bit about the story of the animation, the special features. So we might as well just get talking about the story. So I don't quite know I don't quite know what you guys have already said, or I don't know if I'm first or last or whatever. I don't really know the context of where I'm placed in the episode of this, so it might seem a little bit jarring. And I might have just repeated loads of plot points you guys have already said. Anyway, the story, so this is like my first time experiencing the story of the Abominable Snowmen. Lots of other people have seen it in the form of telesnap reconstructions or the audio or even like one of the novelizations. I don't know. I mean, or even when it was first broadcast, I don't know. But yeah, this is my first time ever experiencing the story of the Abominable Snowmen, and I don't know why I thought this, but I always thought that it was sort of the inferior sort of cousin story to the Web of Fear, because for me it seemed like a prequel basically to the Web of Fear, and I feel when opposed to the Web of Fear, I honestly think it's better. I'm not sure what you guys think about that. That might be a really controversial take. I'm not too sure, but this is a lot better of a story than I was expecting. I feel the main reason is that lots of Troughton stories, and like I love the Troughton era, right? I love the Base Under Siege format, but lots of his six-parters, or even five-parters, really do drag. And like, they don't drag badly in the sense, like, they're 6 episodes and they have enough plot to fill maybe 2 or 3. They repeat lots of plot points, and it's quite formulaic. It's good. It's a good formula, but it does get a bit tiring. I feel the prime example of that is the Ice Warriors. Even the Web of Fear, to a certain extent, does repeat plot points a lot, which isn't great. And I feel it was saying this in the booklet as well, but I happen to agree quite a lot after watching the whole story. It really doesn't drag. It feels like it's organically meant to be 6 parts, maybe 5, maybe 7, I don't know, around that area. It feels like it's naturally, organically slow burning. It's spread, it's spread fairly thinly. It isn't, by its nature, a slow burner. It's not a quick, action-packed story like The Web of Fear, but that works in its favour because it doesn't repeat plot points. It's fairly slow, but it spreads itself thinly enough. But sorry, I don't really know where I'm going with this metaphor. It's a very good story though. I really do like it, and I feel I didn't really get bored watching it, even though, like I said, it's a slow burner. As for the characters, Patrick Troughton and Fraser Hines are on top form as always. I love the Second Doctor and Jamie's dynamic. It's just fantastic. Victoria, this is her second story as proper companion. She's not amazing. I don't love Victoria as a companion. She's endearing enough to be likable, but that's about it. She only really is there to have more chemistry with the Second Doctor and Jamie, and that's fine. And scream at the monsters, I suppose, which we do get a bit of in this episode story, naturally. And as for the animation, we might as well get talking about that since I've waffled about other stuff for like 3.5 minutes. Yeah, the animation was very, very solid. I don't feel it's on the same level as the BBC Studios animations, those being Macroterror, Faceless Ones, Evil of the Daleks, those 3 consecutive stories that are like the holy trinity of Doctor Who animation. I suppose you can include Shada in that, all 25 versions. But yeah, I feel with this animation might quite not be on the same level as those ones I've just mentioned, but it's certainly up there. Like, I feel it's better than Fury from the Deep. I feel the animation style works significantly better with an outdoor landscape to what it did with a futuristic Base Under Siege. Although this is a Base Under Siege, it doesn't really feel like one. It doesn't have the futuristic elements lots of the Patrick Troughton and Season 5 in particular does. I feel the painted landscapes of the Himalayas look actually really visually striking. It's a very nice, the colours are very muted and toned down, but it looks it's a very soothing atmosphere. I really like it, and I feel it works very well with character designs, which, the character designs, they're fine. I never really have much to say on the character designs because they're always good, but not good enough to write home about, but just competent enough not to be harsh on. They're just there. They just serve as character designs, and they're fine. Yeah, they're all right, except for one, which I'll get onto. I do have a couple of slight nitpicks though about the animation, because while it's great, it wasn't perfect. And firstly, it's just simply the style of just the general style. While I do think it's animated competently, the style of the characters I just don't think it's as good as the BBC Studios ones. You know, like I mentioned, the Holy Trinity and Sharda. It's just, I don't know. I just don't think it looks as nice. I feel it looks a little bit 2000s. Maybe not necessarily 2000s, but I wasn't really watching Doctor Who animations back then. But I don't think it looks fantastic. I feel it could have been from 10 years ago, which is fair enough when they have the budget they have. I'm very happy we've got this animation. In fact, it's rather bittersweet given that we probably won't get another until, I don't know, mid 2020s, late 2020, the 30s. I'm not too sure, but it's great to have another animation. But even then, I don't think it's fantastic. I feel it's very good. Another thing is I don't feel the characters really work in the sort of they've gone for like a sort of pseudo 3D environment for the courtyard of Detson, and I don't know. I just think it looks a bit weird. And as for the other sort of nitpick on the animation is especially a bad character design of Padmasambhava. I really hope I pronounced that right. Yeah, he wasn't great. I really didn't like Padmasambhava's design. It looks. I was barely, I wasn't watching Doctor Who or anything in the 2000s, but it gives that vibe. He does not look very good. Looks, I've seen pictures of Padmasambhava from the original story, and to be fair, I'll give them credit. It's hard to animate that. They had a challenge there, but even though that's not really an excuse, I'm not taking it as, I am taking it as it is. I don't think he was very well animated. Yeah. Also, another just tiny nitpick. Sometimes when the character pans over to a thing, from one thing to another, especially when it's moving slowly, it does this really weird, jarring, 6 frames a second sort of shift, and it just looks really weird, especially when lots of the other camera movements are really smooth, which is fairly easy to do. It's just it doesn't look very nice. So those 3 nitpicks are all I really have to say bad about this animation. For the most part, it's nothing to write home about. It's perfectly competent. Another positive actually is the color. It looks very nice. I feel lots of the animations, even the good ones, like Macroterra faceless ones, the color feels like it's just plastered on afterwards, and it's not really given much attention to detail. I know we were talking about that was definitely the case with the original Power of the Daleks, when we were talking about the animations on our second episode of KerVAM. And I feel that absolutely is not the case here, and it hasn't been for the last few animations. I feel the colour has been specially done, and I feel they've put lots of care into it, and I think it works really well. It looks very nice. It's not overly garish or colourful. It just looks organic, like it would have if it had been broadcast in colour originally. I feel it's great. I sadly didn't watch the special features. I haven't quite had the time to, so I'm sorry about that. I might talk a little bit about them in I don't know, in the next episode. I could just talk a little bit about them for a couple of minutes. I just haven't had the time to watch the special features. I'm sure you guys will or already have talked about the animations, the special features of the animation. That's all I have to say, everyone. Thanks for listening to my bit of the segment, and back to you guys.
So thank you, Charlie, for sharing your little thoughts in there about it. It was great to hear what you had to say about the story as well. Well, Ryan and Bill, thank you very much for your thoughts. Have you enjoyed discussing the Abominable Snowmen? I mean, it might be the last time for a very long time we talk about animations on this podcast. So do you feel like we went out on a high with the animations, Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely. Considering that it was either going to be this or Galaxy 4, I think we definitely got the better choice in the end. It's definitely good note to end the animation range on, and even though it did take a long while for it to come out, and we didn't get that much marketing about it until a couple of weeks ago, I'd say. Still more than what we've got from the Jodie Whittaker's last episode, which is saying something, really saying something, and that is basically less than a month to come out. So it's, in terms of marketing, it's a Doctor Who's in a weird spot at the moment.
Yeah, of course.
They
Yeah.
have no idea what to do with their marketing.
I was thinking about the podcast we're making, and I forgot that we've got to make a podcast about an episode of Doctor Who that's actually coming up soon, because I forgot it was even happening. So I think that says it all, isn't it, about the Centennial? No, I do know the Centennial special is coming up. It's coming up next month. It's probably like 5 or 6 weeks away. Will we preview it? I don't know. We'll definitely review it after it comes out. Whether we have good things to say about it, who knows? I don't know. Bill, I'm going to give you your last thought here. On a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you for the Centenary special?
It's
a hard question when you don't know anything about it. But
yeah, you keep asking me really hard questions. I think I want to be like cautiously optimistic about it and say, yeah, I want Jodie to go out on the high.
Yeah.
But as for whether she does, again, because we know so little about the special to begin with, we've got no idea how it's going to work out.
Yeah, exactly. Successfully evading the question there. Very good.
Yeah.
No, I know it's an impossible question to answer, really, isn't it? So, but on other notes, we're going to be covering. We've got lots of podcasts coming up. I know we've been on a break for a while, but there's many other things to come. We're going to discuss the Dalek movies because, of course, both of those were released in the summer on 4K Blu-ray with new sort of mini documentaries about them. They weren't very long, but they were there, so we're going to chat about them and some general thoughts on the movies as well. And if we have 4K Blu-ray players, then we'll talk about if it looks any good in 4K. There you go. Ryan's going to tell us about the 4K. I don't have a 4K Blu-ray player, so I can't. But I'm sure they'll look great in 1080p, 2K as well. So there'll definitely be a pod about that. We're going to talk about season 2 when the Blu-ray becomes a bit nearer. I know that the BFI screening for season 2, and this is going to be the time meddler, and it's going to be on October 29th. So we can assume from that they're not going to release it before October 29th. I would guess, therefore, it's going to be sometime in November that we're going to get a release. Maybe they'll release it somewhere around the anniversary of Doctor Who, because that seems quite a logical time to release anything Doctor Who related. So I would anticipate somewhere near that. It's worth noting that it will mean that this year we've only had 2 collection releases in a year. For a normal year, having that is they said they were aiming for 3, so it's noticeable there's only 2. But we'll be covering that. We'll be covering the Centenary special, and I'm sure we'll think of some other things to talk about as well. But that is it from this edition of KerVAM. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you're watching on YouTube, let us know in the comments that you're enjoying it, and you can also check us out on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or in all the usual places you can find a podcast. Follow it, subscribe it, whatever button you click on those different ones to just keep across what we're doing, because there's going to be lots more coming, and I hope you're going to be able to enjoy it. But from me, from Ryan, from Bill, it's goodbye for now.